If there is one time period of the year that I generally feel quite challenged to actually make a tier list about, it is easily the festival collection period, purely because of the fact that all the triple R rarity or higher cards in this particular booster tends to increase the playability of all the decks in general drastically, with the exception of most of the collab deck of course. And this year is no exception. In fact, it is actually worse for me.
Why?
Purely because every nation got the Ace unit. And not only that, there is an interesting shift in meta with the introduction of DZBT09 as well. So it is gonna be interesting to talk about some of the entry in this video, because a few certain decks have seen an actual good record on competitive level. But how good exactly is that? That is exactly what I'm gonna be talking about today. And if you are here for the first time, welcome. Aside from tier list, I also cover deck reviews after playtested for at least a few times, as well as some other Vanguard related topics that you can think of. Anyway, most of my tier list video will follow these particular 3 rules. First, no collab nations. This is just to make my life easier, but if that particular deck is actually significant in the meta, I will consider it, as you can see with the episode in the tier list. Secondly, as usual, I'm limiting my entries on S and A+ tier just to split from what is considered to be some of the best deck in the format to the deck that is in the range of playable and have some fun with it. So if you're looking for a deck to actually play in the meta, decks in either S tier or A+ tier should be a safe choice for you. And last but not least, this is 100% based on my observation of the meta and also my own actual experience playing a certain deck. So if that particular deck give me a middle finger and doesn't give me a single trigger to actually make it playable at all, then nothing much I can do. My experience just shit with that particular deck. And without further ado, let's get into my DZBT09 plus Festival Collection 2025 tier list. And we're gonna start off of course with Festival Collection. Whoa, what is happening here? Oh, there is a new ban list. Ah, yes, this is the additional part I decided to bring in because we did get a ban list, and that is exactly what I'm gonna be talking about first before we continue back to the intended recording. So we got actually quite a few hits to actually think about, and the first one I feel doesn't really affect that much is definitely Bab Sakura, as much as it got technically 2 different restrictions. Both of them are relatively, I would call weak in a sense, purely because of the fact that yes, Upsay and Dragvida is currently choice restricted, but Bab Sakura pretty much still have all of her toolboxes that she has for quite a while already, and she still pretty much perform more or less at the same level. The restriction is just more towards preventing Bab from getting way too much advantage within a short period of time, and limited defense roll was, I feel, more of like a future proofing, as having a full copy of an order that allow you to recycle even the over trigger is a little bit insane. But it doesn't change the ranking of Bab whatsoever. I do still think the deck is easily one of the best in the format, though maybe not number 1 anymore because Dragvida OT is still ridiculous on certain particular deck. Meanwhile, for Bat, you have my condolences because you pretty much lost all of your consistency pieces that make Elite Glamour disgusting in the recent time, and there is nothing much else to talk about other than the fact that Bat has fallen into C tier. I do still think the deck still have a potential to kind of clap out of nowhere, but the chance of that happening is much lower now. By the way, if you guys want more info on how each of the restrictions affect Bat in certain way, you can check out my recent ban list discussion video. And then we have the other part of the ban list. For Bell ban, I think like Defend Raw is more of a future proofing on a certain deck that might be focusing on the bind zone. Meanwhile, the one that definitely hurt the nation as a whole is definitely the Peace Order and the Nectar Order being restricted to Zorga only. The annoying part about this is that Zorga is not even using Nectar that often, and now that order kind of decommissioned many decks in the Storyhaja, as some of them do rely on both of the Peace Order and the Nectar Order as well. So if you see some of the Storyhaja listing go down just a little bit, that is exactly why. And last but not least, the errata on the Black Wing and White Wing mechanic. I think that one is just a dumb move, but at the same time I can see why it can be cancelled because High 5 is technically a generic order. But compared to the Storyhaja restriction, I don't think the effect is as harsh as the Zorga restriction. So because of all that, I will not touch the Ridicule that's already on the board to begin with. Anyway, back to the actual official recording. Starting off with Festival Collection, which in my opinion does increase the playability of a lot of decks in general, especially with Storyhaja, which is currently the best ace unit right now in the market, being the most expensive one as well. And I can safely say most if not all of the Storyhaja see an increase in playability with the ace unit alone. And the one that did receive the biggest leap in my opinion is easily Leonon. Leonon has always had a problem of not being able to build board well enough, even though the deck does have a way to superior call at least once per turn. And in case you guys are wondering, I'm talking about a mass variant here. And with the release of ace unit and some of the recent order that was revealed, it easily can turn Leonon from being good in turn 4 with Vivase to actually can rush the hell out of you with Leonon mass. However, you do have to play all out with this build, otherwise it won't work. Other than that, I think most of the ace unit does increase the deck performance of all of the decks in general. However, there are 4 particular decks in my opinion that did receive a huge amount of improvement in the Festival Collection separately, and all of them are Dragon Empires, with the one that I think we all can agree on is easily Virgila. Virgila, for the longest time in my tier list video, I have been saying that the deck needs a way to fetch into some of his key pieces consistently. Knight is the exact answer to that problem I was talking about. And not only that, it actually increased the deck total attack from 4 to 5 and increased the total drive from 2 to 3, which is stupid, especially if you see one particular deck that still is in the S tier recently. But the ultimate reason why Knight works so well is the fact that it reduced the total number of cards you actually need to run in your deck. Not only you can run both ultimate skill now, but you also can run it at a much lesser copy and it will still work. This means that you actually have more slot to actually play cards like Naming and also the most recent Fusion Cycler, allowing you to not only have a chance to countercharge and also help you to search into Knight before you ride as well. So all in all, Virgila has been receiving a lot of good cards that play in his favor. The only drawback, he has to go second, but it is 100% safe to say that he is currently the king of going second, and that's why right out of the start of the video, Virgila will receive an S tier, making the top 3 deck in this tier list Virgila, Babsakra, and Estasin. And yes, even after a hit, Babsakra is still quite ahead of a lot of decks in the meta right now. So fix this for sure. Continuing with the trend of improvement, we have to talk about one group of decks that tends to be shit upon by a lot of people just due to how bad the start product was, and that is Quick Start Boss unit. And as much as all of them and together with some of the decks that did get a support, I can safely say Triumph and Grandpa easily received the biggest glow up I have seen, and that come in the form of Verbel Dragon. Just for those who don't know what this card does, this card helps you to search into a grade 3 card and refunded a counterblast cost if you fail to do so, while also help you to extend into one attack even if that attack has to be done at the start of the battle phase. Which means that for Triumph Dragon, the deck now has a lot more consistent way to search into not just himself but also all of the grade 3 cards that you run in your deck like Straff Command Dragon, allowing you to turbo into his critical rush better while still getting additional attack. At the same time, for Grandpa Triumph, it makes the deck playable. The search for the grade 3 is great because the deck play around the grade 3 to begin with, but the fact that it also boosts Triumph Dragon further before it get a restand a second time with the Grandpa skill is a huge deal. And the same can be said also with the Koro Grandpa deck, as the deck now has more cards to essentially help them to restand, which is not a big deal at a glance, but it's still a huge plus nonetheless. And because of all that, I personally feel now Triumph Dragon deserve to become one of the better alright tier deck. Like, as much as its power level is not as high as decks like Fafneil, the fact that the deck has finally get the last piece of the puzzle, it just improved the deck so much better. And of course for Grandpa, it's definitely get a huge jump from being a noob tier deck into definitely an alright tier deck as well. Meanwhile, for the Koro Grandpa, I wouldn't call he changed that much. And that is pretty much all the deck that I consider did get a significant support. I apologize for all the fans of those decks that I did not mention in this part of the video, but I do feel all of the support that this deck did get doesn't really bring the deck to the deal level, but rather it just make the deck just slightly more playable, and that apply to most of them. So if you guys want me to elaborate more on those supports, do leave down in the comments below, because we're gonna be talking about the only deck that did came out during the Festival Collection, Alfred, or what I like to call KOK. Anyway, Alfred as a deck personally, I think it does have some unique charm to it. It does play like the original Alfred while also still have a modern sensibility, like being able to call it once per turn instead of can spam inconsistently, and at the same time also have additional critical pressure while also helping to restand rear guards all on his own. The only problem with Alfred at the time of recording, in my opinion, is the fact that there is not enough Royal Paladin card that does play well into his playstyle. Yes, we did receive Virgila and Zero along with the release of Alfred, but I feel this is far from enough, and of course the fact that he cannot boost is definitely very annoying. So if we can get a way to make use of that back row center rearguard circle, that would help the deck a lot more. Also, all of the support that he did receive in this booster seems to be personal right lock. So if you cannot get Alfred for a personal right at all, the deck is 100% brick hard against you, which is kind of sad in my opinion, because Alfred, despite getting the biggest glow up he ever received in years, Alfred is still currently an alright tier deck for me, on the same level as decks like Houndraiser and Luan. The deck definitely needs a little bit more to actually shine, and that is pretty much all the entries I do want to talk about in the festival collection. Overall, I do feel the off-screen adjustment I made to many of the entries in this tier list in general should give you enough guideline on how much the sphere has changed with the release of the Ace unit. But it is the release of DZBT09 that kind of solidified the rise of going second deck, because 80% of the deck that was released in DZBT09 plays much better going second, and this can be demonstrated with a brand new deck for Dragon Empire, C-Build. Yes, as usual, we're gonna be starting off with Dragon Empire, so get used to it. If there is one genre of decks in Dragon Empire that is competing for how good they are, I can safely say Orderlords definitely has a really steep competition. You have Emma that has the best control out of the three that is currently in the race. Overlord has the best power thanks to ability to go double personal right, and Verbel has the highest amount of consistent retiring, allowing him to be one of the best harvest user. So what does C-Build do to actually fight against this relatively highly competitive style of playing? Well, by essentially just recycling your own cards. As we all know, C-Build has ability of Mental Pollute to essentially give a little boost to your rear guard, but they have to be retired at the end of turn. Fortunately enough, Bushiroad decided to give enough support for C-Build to essentially not only make use of that Mental Pollute state, but also able to recycle it really well with his inbuilt order that comes with his right line, allowing you to recycle one rear guard every turn. C-Build give one draw every time a rear guard is retired at the end of the turn, and Desolate Flare Dragon also help to return more cards back to your hand, essentially making sure that all the key pieces, as long as you manage to fetch it as soon as possible, is going to be reused it every single turn within C-Build. And this is on top of the fact that he is, in my opinion, one of the faster Orderlord user, in the sense that as long as he's going second, he is able to restand to rear guard with a huge amount of power boost on top of that. And fortunately enough, since you're going to be playing 4 copies of the C-Build order, you don't really lose that much because you still get a consistent 3 drive every single turn with C-Build. The only problem with C-Build right now compared to the rest 4 is the fact that the deck still use a whole lot of resource, and if you do not draw into the key piece that actually help you to recycle, all aspect of C-Build from offense all the way to defense also take a little bit of a dip. And because of all that, I would consider C-Build to be kind of rogue tier deck, at least in my opinion. I'm sorry for all Overlords fans, but the competition is very steep, and unfortunately none has really reached the level of utility and pressure as some of the other Dragon Empire decks in the viable tier, and that's why I'm leaving him in the rogue tier, making him fighting against pretty much all of the Orderlord decks in this tier as well. But before we move to the other entry, there is one particular highlight I have to talk about. This might be a surprise for a lot of you guys, because the support wasn't really intended to be for this deck, but because of the race that this deck is in, it got a support, and that is Grandra. Grandra, being Unison Dragon just like C-Build, actually benefit from all of the C-Build support in general, with Bucky essentially help Grandra more so than C-Build for some reason. And on top of that, Desolate Flare Dragon also works really well with Grandra, considering more of his recent support that does retire themselves, allowing you to essentially recycle some of the pieces that he needed for the next turn. And also now Grandra has a way to search for Draco Resonance a lot more consistently now, which is a huge relief for the deck. However, whatever problem that was plaguing C-Build also plagued Grandra in my opinion, because of the fact that to close game with Grandra properly, properly, you do need a few pieces to kind of combo everything properly. So if you cannot get all these pieces, you are definitely struggling, just like Sybil. So where do I think Grandra deserves his position in? Well, this might surprise you guys. I do think he has a rogue potential. Not as much as Sybil. Sybil is still better just purely because of him being an overlord style unit. But it is safe to say this, in my opinion, is the biggest leap in quality of life in Grandra playstyle that he has seen. And that's why I'm leaving him in rogue tier. And to be honest, the last entry from the Dragon Empire, Chojoroji, also does fall into this particular tier. With his new support essentially self-bind like Sukuyodaji and also being a shield unit. The problem with that card though is the fact that you kind of have to use Chojoroji to actually guard with that card, and look at the H tier right now.
Brother,
Moving on to Dark State, we have to talk about a brand new right line coming from DZBT09, Harduru. And I'll put it in the simplest way possible. Harduru is a Myco trying to be a Dark State deck while also have some elements from Eva.
Are you serious?
I mean, she is literally in one of the main cards of this deck. I have already covered this in my video, but Harduru is easily one of the more consistent Dark State deck at the time of recording, from easy soul building, filter, board building, and also decent chunk of power boost and also pressure. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not used to be in this position. The only thing that is kind of being held back is the fact that there is still an element of RNG that you have to deal with. It's just that you deal with this RNG element so often that it reduces the chance of you actually whiffing those RNGs. So I am happy to inform that Harduru will receive an A+ tier from me, with him being just right above my goal. The reason why I'm not putting him higher than decks like Barry, Estasian or Blancmeyer is the fact that the deck that is just right above him minus buff also hard counter him to an extent, because he does take a few turns to actually get into the gear. And that's why, as much as he is a very good deck to play in the meta right now, I don't think he is a top 5 at the moment. And we have to kind of pull the damper down, because the rest of the card is not bad, but it also doesn't really makes this deck scarier.
Why are you like this?
A good example for this is Fafneil. Fafneil received essentially a 15k booster that allow you to also search into Rhino and put it directly into Soul, ensuring that you will always guarantee riding into Rhino at the end of turn 3. Though I do feel that is not really a huge problem to begin with, considering you can combine with certain cards in the Dark State roster to actually make it to work. The only problem with that grade 1 though, in my opinion, is the fact that you are kind of forced to run the original Fafneil in the right deck. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but Rhino is such a crucial part to the deck now that you rather have all of his skill online as soon as possible. But alas, if we enable that, that would be one of the most disgusting overlord deck we have ever seen in years. So as much as there is the way to fix the Fafneil issue, I don't think it should be patched, at least for now. And that's why I'm still leaving him in the B tier, so he's still pretty okay to play, but I'm willing to increase his ranking to be above Tegria. I'm sorry, Dub Slasher. Next in the line, we have a support that should have come 3 booster earlier, and that is the support for Glass. The new support is not bad in itself. Ability to become a 35k shield is pretty good. On top of being able to boost the entire front row is a plus thing for the deck. However, I feel at the time of recording, developer is still confused with how they should carry on with Glass. Like, is he supposed to be a stall deck that can become a Waga playstyle deck after like 6 turns? Or is he supposed to be a deck that actually has a similar aggro as Waga? I feel they are trying to find this, and I feel they might have found it, but they are not ready to release the support yet. That is just the feeling I got with Glass in particular. I know it is very weird, but that's just the feeling I get. So for now, I'm still gonna leave him in an alright tier deck, just exactly same spot that he got support last time. Seriously, I do feel Bushiroad really have to up their design game when it comes to updating the older Dark State deck, because I feel like they have been trying to do this pivoting thing to many decks right now. Just like the next entry I'm gonna be talking about in this list, is dolls. Yes, Direful Doll technically did get a brand new support in the form of the Fusion Cycler, which kind of feels Gungunram with Flaming Pony, which in all fairness not a bad support at all, but it doesn't feel like a right support for Undro, at least in my opinion. It kind of situational if you want to draw it, and so does the Soul Charge, but I do feel this is not the puzzle piece that Doll is looking for, considering that transitioning from a tank deck into a mid-range deck. As much as this Fusion Cycler works well, I don't think that's the solution that Dolls are looking for. What Dolls are looking for now, in my opinion, is either a slight boost to their defensive capability or a proper boost to their offensive capability. And that's why, with the pain in my heart, I'm gonna drop Undro down a little bit into a rogue tier deck, like a bottom rogue tier. I'm not saying his playstyle is bad, but I do feel like Bushiroad taking a middle line with supporting the Dolls has always been my biggest gripe for a long time, and this argument still retained after almost 2 years. So yeah, a cost has to be paid to balance out how good Harduru is by essentially pretty much giving a very mid support to all of the deck that got supported in this booster. Moving from Dark State, we goes to like the main draw of this particular booster, and that is Blanket, because we not only just get one of the most anticipated unit from Limit Break era to return, but also the collab is in Blanket, as we got Kaiser and Bang Braven. As someone who have been trying to just bring Kaiser to play in the tournament for the LoLs, it is safe to say this is one of the trolliest deck I ever played.
That escalated quickly.
Because right now, it is very easy to get around the guard break for Kaiser. Yes, we have Glory Maker, but this is not it. The deck needs a lot more draws, a better way to build their board aside from using 4 copies of the Detonation, and most importantly, it needs more drives.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
And that's why I'm leaving Kaiser right beside Heroes. That is how much of a joke of the deck it is at the time of recording. Which the same can't really be said with Dusha, because the support that did come with Kaiser is actually not bad played on Dusha. Shadow Kaiser is technically playable in Dusha, and based on account of many people I have talked to who play Dimension Robo, Kaiser is just a side grade to Dusha, very similar to how Vert is a side grade to Labrador right now. Nothing much to say about Dusha though, because I don't think the support really bring him to the new level. In fact, it doesn't change much for Dusha right now, with the only biggest addition I would say is the Ace unit. Being able to emergency get one card that you miss for any deck in general for Blanket is really helpful, and that's why I do think Dusha is still a viable option. But is he as good as I thought he was? Not as much, so I'm just gonna bring him down just a little bit, but he is definitely still in a viable range. And then moving into the collab deck itself, well, it is safe to say that Bushiroad take their lessons from Love and Berry a lot and kind of make these two decks not as good on launch like those two decks, with Braven being the slightly tankier out of the two thanks to his ability to boost the TSU initial value, and on top of that he is a restander, allowing him to essentially making use of the skill of his mate, Kaiser and side-by-side Superbia, and use it to a great extent. The only drawback with Braven, at least for me at the time of recording, is the fact that he actually follow a very simple pattern, and that pattern can be easily predicted and also easily disrupted, and that's why I'm putting Bang Braven as a rogue tier deck. I mean, he still have a good potential, and the fact that Legend can still return triggers back to deck is still a really strong mechanic, and I think that's also partially the reason why they kind of make Kaiser a little bit weaker, because they are not sure how strong this mechanic is gonna be. Meanwhile, for Lulu or Superior, the deck surprisingly plays pretty well and does tank pretty well thanks to the innate additional power, and on top of that the deck plays a little bit like Vermilion in defensive style, so the deck does perform decently well, though I don't think the deck is as good as Braven, because the power increment for all their skill are generally very small, with the only exception being the Superbia, thanks to the grade 3 Superbia ability to restand a column. Overall, I do think Superbia is an alright tier deck because of how strong TS and Brave Knight engines are, it kind of counterbalance out how little the power boost Superior gets in general. And last but kinda least is a silhouette who did get one support, which is
Just
not arms.
do it!
And I'll be honest, the fuck you give the support to this deck for? The card is so unnecessary. I rather you use that one last double R slot to make something more productive for the robo in general. That is how unnecessary the card it is for me. Some people might say yes, it does have some use, but the cost of calling itself back is 3 energy, which I'll be honest is not bad, but I feel if this card is an arms, it would have been much better. And that's why I'm not changing the positioning for silhouette as well, leaving him just right above Daiser. So still an alright deck. And now let's move on into Keter Sanctuary, which is for once not vanilla, thanks to one particular popular unit that finally get the support in this booster, and that's Minerva. Minerva received quite a few good support in this booster, including her grade 4 version that helped her to lean into her OTK aspect better, and a grade 2 which essentially pretty much help you to ensure that her grade 4 version can be used consistently while also double off as a restander. And on top of this session, Angel kind of designed to be played around her playstyle. The deck definitely have seen a huge jump in power boost, though to be fair, the deck haven't been receiving a proper support for years now. Though I do have to say this first, this is all happening if you're going second. Yes, the restander does work on going first, but I do feel you would want to keep her alive as much as possible, because some of the issue that Minerva has is surprisingly enough the lack of space to run Superior Core Engine in her deck in general. Yes, there is one particular card that does allow her to be played better, I'll come back to that later, but I do feel just like the original Genesis, the deck needs way too many key pieces, and there is not enough resource even after all this time to actually help you to fetch all these resources consistently. So after all this, would I consider her a viable option? Kind of, yeah. I think she is a very viable option, though she also have a syndrome of both Overlord and also Dark State playstyle, so I wouldn't put her as a high viable deck, but rather on the lower side. Like when you go soft, you go soft, but if you can't go soft, you kind of die, especially considering some of the deck in the meta right now are able to hit at Minerva where she is at the weakest. So that's why I would consider her as somewhat of a viable option, but just barely. And this might kind of go against what I said about her in my video, because I thought Asel was actually better.
Are you fucking dumb?
And I'm still standing on that ground, to be honest, because what Minerva is lacking, Asel excel at it. His ability to be able to build board is pretty much close to none, and the fact that he is one of the most consistent user of Keter Power now, thanks to Platina ability to recycle one order back over and over, does make the deck a little bit more easier to play when it comes to board building. However, the problem with Asel is also relatively similar to Minerva as well, in a sense that you do rely on RNG into his attack extension. So even if you can spare multiple of his skill within the same turn, you do want to be careful on what you chose to call as well, because not only you can only call it over an open circle,
No. No!
but also you can only call it within that top 7 cards. So if all of your pieces has been killed or was removed by any other means, Asel struggle a little bit. And the worst offense that I feel Platina kind of did, though not by his own, he got power crept by a bloody promo
Serious?
for the other archetype. That is how sad Platina Asel actually is. Like in my Platina video, I defended him but also shit on him, though leaning more toward defense. I agree, it's a very mid update, which is feels like kind of a trend actually within the season 2. Like only one of the 3 main season 2 unit got a good support, meanwhile the other 2 literally eating shit. So sadly for Asel, I'm willing to bring him up a little bit in the same tier. He's not even joining the rogue tier though. And remember I just said about a particular PR kind of invalidate Platina? Well, it is a PR support that is also a generic for the next entry, and that is Nebula Knight. Nebula Knight's credit credit to where it's due, the deck has a lot of good capability. Ability to recycle units back from drop to your deck, allowing you to essentially just call the unit that you wanted to call in the first place is actually really good. And on top of that, the deck also have a very decent early game aggro, meanwhile also have some elements from other clans, minus the Paladin obviously, that does make the archetype a little bit more interesting. The problem with Nebula Knight though, in my opinion at the time of recording, is just the fact that the number is a little bit to be desired. Like if a +5 came in to be put anywhere on this video right now, it would be here, because the archetype just carries so many unusual mechanics from Keter Sanctuary that it became a master of none, with the only redemption of this card is the Nebula Knight order, the very card that does give a little bit of superior core ability to Minerva, and also the very recent Platina Asel is invalidated. This order is such a powerful card and the best thing about Nebula Knight right now. So yeah, this deck does have a lot of good toolbox, but I think the deck needs a little bit more push to be stable, and because of that, I'm putting the deck into B tier. It's a good start of a used Quake archetype, which normally is
quite underwhelming,
though it did not reach Storyhaja level, at least in my opinion. And speaking of Storyhaja, the last entry for Keter deck is Undercover. I have to cover specifically because of the fact that the grade 1 that the deck did get is insanely powerful. The fact that you can just monitor Trust into your drop is more than enough of a fix of the current deck. Like yes, the deck still suffer from Eva syndrome, but the fact that now you don't have to worry about your order being sent to damage zone says a lot about what you can generally do with Undercover. So pretty much the deck just search better, the deck just give more option to actually put into the gauge even the person are right, because of the same card also able to get card back from the gauge. And I wish they released more of this card for the gauge related deck, and that's why I'm willing to bring up Undercover into a rogue tier deck. The deck number is still a little bit underwhelming for it to be considered viable, but with how much Undercover has getting more and more consistent for every support it has received, that's a commendable progress by whoever is in charge of this archetype. And then we finally come to the last part of DZBT09 supports, and that is the supports for Storyhaja.
Of course!
Storyhaja pretty much in my opinion is essentially a youth Quake booster, where all 3 of the used Quake deck get a support, including the brand new right line Skyroller. Interestingly enough, this is the most flexible out of the 3. Skyroller only needs one thing, drop. As long as you can hit 15 soul in your drop, you pretty much get a 5 attack, and if you got 20 or more, your deck is pretty much somewhat self-sufficient without the need of personal right. And combining with cards like Follower Rapid and Trusted the Vixen, you will be able to reach that 15 drop very quickly, and in certain cases even quicker than Night Rose. The only drawback with the Skyroller at the time of recording is got indirectly hit when it just got released because of the errata fix I mentioned earlier. Losing one of the best toolbox that the deck can have with the Nectar does hurt the deck a little bit, though the deck is also very flexible enough to actually run engines like Plant Token Engine, RPD Engine, Order Engine, or even Mega Colony Engine in its deck. So I would say its flexibility is enough for him to kind of escape from being affected by the errata fix completely. But the deck still needs a little bit more help, at least in terms of hand size wise. If you're just playing Skyroller purely, the deck just put everything into milling everything. So because of that, I am gonna be putting Skyroller in a rogue tier deck. Skyroller is an insane driver, and that alone is enough for him to be A- tier, at least for me. Moving on to Storyhaja, and I'll be honest, is pretty good. Like ability to essentially has a bit more energy utilization is good, a bit more shield is good, and also the fact that you can recycle back your order without the heavy need of running the PR. But I don't think the deck changed that much, especially considering this is one of the very few decks that wasn't affected by the errata fix, because you have to play Codex twice every turn anyway. So because of that, I'm not changing the positioning of Storyhaja as a rogue tier deck. The deck still have a good chance of coming back out of nowhere, and the deck still have one of the best floodgate in the game right now. That alone leaves Storyhaja in A- tier. And the same can be said with Meteor as well. Yes, Meteor did receive a new support that also resists and also can revive one card back from drop, essentially making more cards able to recycle from drop, which is something that Meteor wasn't able to do that well in the past, with the only card that helps you to recycle is the Meteor PR. So with this, the deck now has a lot more flexibility in terms of what they can call and build. And considering how much of a utility box Meteor archetype is, that is a huge deal. Though those utility of Meteor is not exactly game ending, but they did a good job at messing the tempo of your opponent gameplay, and that's why I'm not changing its position in A- tier. And that is pretty much all of the DZBT09 cards that I want to talk about, but we do have one more group of cards to talk about, the PRs. And yes, for the sake of my sanity, I'll be including the new PR right line deck that was just reviewed for Dragon Empire as well, and that is exactly what I'm gonna be starting off with. And Grax, in my opinion, has a very unique playstyle of being a Highlander Dino Dragon, and the deck has a lot of pluses. The right line is a very solid searcher in general. The PR that comes with the right line is pretty disgusting as a generic card, and the cards that was released within the promo deck itself is good enough to play around some of the very cheap support like Eurofast. The problem with that though is that you have to search out this card out first for it to actually be consistent, and there is not a lot of opportunity for you to actually do that if you chose not to run your PR. So unfortunately, this is one of those decks where even if you get the whole deck for 20 bucks, you still need to spend roughly another $60 for the mangas to actually improve the deck consistency in general. And that's why I am leaving Grax at the low alright tier. I mean, the deck is in the playable state, and at least it is better than Spino Marquis in the sense that Spino Marquis only search on turn 3 onwards. But is it a good representation of a proper return of Tachikase in the standard format?
I mean, it's alright, like...
Unfortunately, we have to go back to the dragon with El Kiraba. El Kiraba got foil fly dragon, which is pretty much an additional restanders unit in the deck in itself. On top of it being an overcharge unit, this means that essentially the deck has a lot more ways to restand outside Shahoop himself, and on top of that, the deck also has more overcharge unit, making cards like Backseer a little bit better because you are running overcharge unit at a higher frequency. The only problem is the same issue with a lot of archetype based deck where they want to run their own archetype more, but their toolbox are not strong enough and you don't have a choice but to run generic. At the same time, the power level that 4-fly does bring doesn't really change the tempo of El Graber that much. The deck still need to go first to actually win consistently and struggle if it has to go afterwards, unless you pull Tusha Hope. And that's why I am not changing the positioning of El Kiraba. It has always been a very viable deck to bring to the tournament, provided your luck is very good when it comes to rock, paper, scissors, and it still remains as what it is. And the last Dragon Empire deck I'm gonna be talking about in this video, finally, is one of the Order Lord contestant, Verbel. I mentioned about side build earlier in the video, and I did bring Verbel up just a little bit, but does the new PR actually helps him in any way? Absolutely. The card essentially just fixed one of the biggest issue that Verbel has, and that is a Sophie choice of either you get a free retire or you get a free power. And to make things worse, you have to retire first before you get a power, which does make Verbel number a little bit piss poor. Nahara does help the deck in that regard by essentially making use of Verbel being an overlord to essentially just buff the entire front row, and this one doesn't care if your opponent is at grade 3 or not. The problem with Verbel though is that Verbel playstyle is so limited for being an Order Lord that even Nahara helped to fix the issue, it still struggles a little bit. The deck do need best hardware to get a lot of resources and in the best way possible, and unlike decks like Cybuild, the deck doesn't really have a good way to consistently search into those orders aside from Latifa, which also eat into soul, making the deck struggle a little bit because you do need soul to get that additional drive back from Verbel. It is kind of a sad fate because this is a situation where you have to run a very specific card in your soul to get the full benefit of the card. Though to be fair, Verbel is technically an MC deck from the others two at least, so I don't think that the Verbel will be forgotten anytime soon, and we might be in fact seeing a further upgrade to Verbel as well. And I hope when that came, it will fix the Verbel completely. But for now, I'm gonna leave him in an alright tier deck as the second worst Order Lord candidate at the time of recording. Moving on to the next PR we got from the upcoming PR pack, we have New Fate, which is technically a Pure Moon support, but specifically more for Lequia. And if you're considering just Lequia, I would consider it to be a very amazing card because because for one, it fixed the issue of the queer not gaining advantage when you pay for her cost to populate the field. This card fixed that and kind of refunded you back by giving you a draw. And on top of that, this card herself is also an attack extender, allowing you to go into a proper fire attack now with Pale Moon. And considering how well Lequia can loop her resource, this is a perfect fit for the deck. Though I do have to point it out that the deck still struggle in getting all the pieces after all this time, and the same issue still maintains, and Nilfa does kind of force you to run Doreen the Trusted. Not saying it's a bad card, but I feel without Doreen, Nilfa advantage is not as good as it could be. But is it good enough to actually shift Lequia up at all? Yes, I do think now the deck has reached the raw potential. The ridiculous number that the deck can reach with Dorian and Rising Dragon is still ridiculous, and now that the deck has just a little bit more of a consistency, it does make everything a lot better. I wouldn't call it the perfect deck yet because I feel the deck just needs more ways to filter soul more consistently, but for now, this is what we get. Oh, and just for those who are wondering, it works with Hari, but I feel Nilfa usage with Hari is so limited right now because it's only work with Dragon Masquerade.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
So I'm not considering New Fate to work with Hari at the time of recording. I'm used to this already, but this is such a long video, doesn't it? So long, in fact, that we get a PR that has a name that contains that particular adjectives, and that is what they call Long Sorceress. This is a Hex of support that pretty much do what Selgaon does, but at least do a little bit better, as she allow you to either leave the card at the top of the deck or put it into your soul, making your soul fixing better, and also have more option to actually check your top card. And the fact that it have a Great Tourless effect is not bad as well, on top of it being able to restand by itself when you trigger a trigger, making the number in the earlier part of the game just a little bit better. The problem with what they call Long Sorceress, though, I feel, is not caused by her, aside from the fact that it's another counterblast for Hexa-Orb. Hexa-Orb is already a very resource heavy deck to begin with, how much counterblast you are using every single turn, and to top it up, the deck struggle to draw and also struggle to fit in the Superior Core engine as well, because it would mess with whatever you check your top deck with. And with this all element combined, her punishment is to move into C tier.
Why?
Yes, I am not kidding. I love my Hexa-Orb, but I did not expect the deck to move at such slow pace that it couldn't keep up with the meta anymore. And I will say this again, Bushiroad, stop designing boss in it to be locked behind Persona right. If you have to do it, lock only 20% instead of what we have here right now. Moving back to another clan related card, we have Undulate Assault, essentially an Aqua Force support, and I'll be honest, it's pretty much a View Assault with a slightly different timing, but also able to call itself back from drop and being a 10k booster. It had a lot of things done right, like all this thing that I said just now is beneficial for the deck. The problem is some of the skill timing is a little bit awkward, like Energy Blast 3 when you play Blue Storm Armada is not bad, but considering how unoften you play more than 2 copies of Blue Storm Armada every single game, this means that you only have 1 to 2 chances for this card to come back from the drop. On top of that, the Soul Blast timing is on boost, not after boost like View Assault. So it does mess some combo a little bit, though based on a more experienced Meteor player that I have talked to, it doesn't affect the playstyle that much. So I would leave him in the same location that I left him in the last tier list, as one of the more viable deck in the format, but very similar to Equilibra that we talked earlier, it has to go first. Finally, we have reached the end of the tier list with the very last PR I have to talk about, and that is Lina for Powerful. If there is one thing that I feel Bushiroad has been doing right ever since her reveal, is that after the LBTO3, Herminia has been getting pretty much an increment in her power level and consistency consistently. Like her new form is amazing, work well with pretty much all the older powerful cards. In fact, it gel everything together. Then you have the LBTO1 with the grade 2, which at a glance it looks bad until I realize you pretty much can just skip the counterblast card, making it a 20k attacker with a free draw that can also stack up the power further. Then we have Lina, which pretty much is another powerful searcher, helping to fill the hole where Custodian left, and that is the fact that you have to superior call the card if it is grade 2 or less. Lina pretty much ensure that it will stay in your hand. And secondly, this allow you to search for the original Herminia, pretty much guaranteeing you the cost of Herminia's skill, which is either discard Herminia cards or counterblast one if you Persona road. So this does increase the aggro of the deck by a whole lot. And I haven't even talked about the other part of her skill, being a self-prestander after it boosted once. That is crazy. Yes, it is a slightly nerfed version of one of the older powerful cards, but the fact that this is free and is also a powerful searcher that can also loop consistently is really good. And I haven't even talked about one of the craziest thing about this card. The search skill has an alternate cost. You either counter blast one or retire one of your other rare cards. So that means that you can actually chain Lina into another Lina until you search into all the pieces that you needed, filtering your deck to the next level while also making sure that your aggro remain the same. That is how strong Herminia is, and I can safely say for Japan Relical Cup this year, I'm seeing her as a very good deck to be a top deck because this card just makes everything better for the deck. This, in my opinion, is at the top of my viable tier. That is how much improvement Herminia has received, in my opinion. And that is the end of this tier list. I know this is not exactly a good timing to drop a tier list because by the time I finish this video, DBT10 is probably on the way within less than a month. I do not know what will happen to the DBT10 era of Vanguard, but I hope it doesn't overshadow this one too much. And that's all I have for today. Once again, if you have your own thoughts and want me to explain more in the other entry that I did not go through in the video itself, do leave down in the comments below. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to clap that sub and become a member for some cool perks. This is Mac Megane signing out.